This is the Tombigbee Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write a small town in Mississippi called Columbus along the Tombigbee River. Columbus, Mississippi is a town rich in history. The Tombigbee River has played a major role in that town since its inception. This episode is about the first bridge built across the river at Columbus and its bridge builder, Horace King. Horace King was an enslaved man owned by John Godwin, a bridge architect and engineer. Godwin was responsible for many, if not most, of the early bridges built in Georgia, Alabama, East Mississippi, and Tennessee. Columbus at this time was part of Alabama and had not become recognized as East Mississippi at the time. John Godwin was from Cheraw, South Carolina, and moved to Columbus, Georgia to accept a $14,000 bid to complete a bridge across the Chattahoochee River to Girard, Alabama. He purchased a home there and built cabins across the street for his enslaved workers and their families. He would be contracted to build additional bridges in Georgia and Alabama, in which his two slaves, Horace King and Henry Murray, King's brother-in-law, whom he had taught bridge building, were put in charge. He obtained special clearance papers from Alabama and Georgia, giving the two men the authority to finish the bridge contracts, sign Godwin's name, and accept payment for work done. Horace and Murray were granted manumission by an act of the Alabama legislature eventually in 1848, when Godwin was forced into bankruptcy to keep the two men from being bought by his competitors. These men spent the remainder of Godwin's life working with him rather than for him. Alabama legislator Robert Jemison Jr. authorized the bill, with which we will be discussing later, and he had strong ties to what became East Mississippi, specifically Lowndes County and Columbus. After John Godwin's bankruptcy and physical decline, King went into business for himself, a difficult position for a Black man in pre-Civil War Alabama, even as a free man. King and Godwin's friends went back to the Alabama legislature to help King gain the right to equal rights, including the right to sue in the state of Alabama. King would build many bridges as a freedman on his own in Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, and Mississippi, some with Godwin and others with his four sons who apprenticed under their father's watchful eye. King would eventually become a politician, and as a state legislature, he served for one term. Though highly qualified for office, Reconstruction ended and Jim Crow laws and voter intimidation and suppression was rampant in Alabama, much like in Mississippi. And so King felt that working as a legislator was not to his advantage, and he went back to bridge building. Before he was freed, King built the first bridge across the Tombigbee River that was ever built in Lowndes County. Godwin and King built covered bridges using the town lattice truss design developed by Connecticut bridge builder Ithiel Town. King would build 3 bridges in Mississippi in 1845 for Robert Jemison Jr., the Alabama representative, because that area was still considered part of Alabama. He would eventually sponsor the bill for his freedom. The bridge built on 4th Avenue South in Columbus, also known as Bridge Street on the Columbus, Mississippi maps, was built between 1842 and 1844. The first record of proposed construction is found in 1836 in the Jackson Southern Argus. Its completion is first mentioned in 1843 in the Southern Reformer as being done by, quote, a colored architect. The bridge is presumed by various people's descriptions and sketches to have been a close match to the one King built across the Chattahoochee, and the smaller scale one he built in Steens, Mississippi, also for Jemison. At the time, the bridge on 4th Street or Fourth Avenue was built, Jemison owned a sawmill and a grist mill in the Luxapalila Creek, just south of town. To access his mills, Jemison needed 2 bridges and contracted King to build them. One of those stood well into the 1940s, and a 1936 photo is in the Library of Congress of the covered bridge. The original bridge required piers of rock built in columns in the Tombigbee River. The lattice frame was made of sawn timber from Jemison's mill. All of the timbers would have been connected by large wooden pegs called tree nails. This bridge, much like the ones he built at West Point, Alabama, Eufaula, Alabama, and Florence, Alabama, cost $22,000. The one at Columbus, Mississippi, was funded by Jemison. Jemison and Horace King developed a close relationship, which led to Jemison's 3 smaller covered bridges that he had King build, 2 to his mill and 1 in Steens, where he had another sawmill and grist mill. King worked as his own boss while Godwin remained in Girard, Alabama on other projects. Keep in mind that at the time of the Tombigbee River Bridge being built, King was still an enslaved man. After finishing the bridges in Lowndes County, King was hired by the state of Alabama to build circular staircases at the new Capitol building in Montgomery. King's wife had been a free woman even when he was enslaved. She was born a free woman. Due to her status, their children were born as free persons. After King's freedom and bridge building successes, King owned 2 homes, one in Girard, Alabama, and one in Moore's Bridge in Georgia. He eventually moved his family to LaGrange, Georgia, where they continued to build bridges, storehouses, stores, and college buildings. He died May 28th in 1885 in LaGrange, Georgia. His sons went on to be successful builders, businessmen, pastors, and even a college trustee at Clark University. In February of 2017, the Alabama state government hung a portrait of Horace King in the Capitol building he had helped build. This was the first portrait of an African American to be displayed there. King's monument in Mulberry Street Cemetery in LaGrange, Georgia, has the Masonic symbol on it and the simple phrase, Master Covered Bridge Builder. To learn more about Columbus and its history, follow and like the historic home tours of Columbus, Mississippi on their Facebook page. I want to thank you for following me on the Tombigbee Tales, and join me for our next story tomorrow.